What's up, everybody? It's Johnny, and I am back today to talk about the PPP loan. As most of you know, I am a CPA and I work with small business owners on a daily basis. The biggest questions I've received lately are all related to the PPP loan. In today's video, I am going to break down the most important things to know related to the PPP loan and answer some common questions. If you have not clicked subscribe, please click that button now. I would really appreciate it. In order to keep this video clear, concise, and easy to follow, I will be breaking it down into 3 parts. In part 1, let's discuss and get a clear understanding of the PPP process and important dates. I'm going to break down the timeline from the moment you receive the PPP loan funds to when you must apply for forgiveness, to when you can expect a decision from the SBA on how much of the loan you may forgive. A lot of time periods and dates have been thrown your way, and it is likely that you may be feeling a little confused. By the end of this video, you should have more confidence as to what is going on. In part 2, we're going to look into more detail into the PPP Loan Forgiveness application process. I'll be talking about the Form 3508, the Form 3508EZ, and the Form 3508S. I'm going to break down which forms apply to which borrowers, where to get the forms, and who to send the forms to. And in part 3, I'm going to answer some common questions. I'm talking about questions that I've personally received, as well as questions that have been addressed directly from the SBA website. All right, everybody, we're going to dive into part 1 of the video. We're going to talk about dates and the timeline. Let's start with the most important date, the disbursement date. The disbursement date is the date you received your PPP funding. For most of you, this will be any time from April to June 30th and maybe even later. All right, so in the timeline, the first step is to know your disbursement date and write that down. The second step is to know the end of your covered period. The covered period is the date you receive your funds to the date that you have to spend your funds on eligible expenses to achieve loan forgiveness. When the PPP loan was originally passed, the original rule was that the covered period was 8 weeks. However, the Flexibility Act changed that covered period from 8 weeks to 24 weeks. This 24-week period has to end and should end before December 31st, 2020. So what does this all mean? Specifically, the covered period is the time from the disbursement date to 24 weeks. The covered period will be 24 weeks unless you specifically elect the prior 8-week period. So now, as we move our way through the timeline, we have the disbursement date, and then we have the covered period. Once the covered period ends, you have 10 months to apply for loan forgiveness. This 10 months to apply is simply an allowance of time. Okay, so at this point, we know our disbursement date, we know the covered period, and we know that after the covered period ends, you have up until 10 months to apply for loan forgiveness. After applying for loan forgiveness, your application will go to the bank. The bank has 60 days to review and send the application to the SBA for approval. Once the SBA receives the application from the bank, the SBA has 90 days to review. The SBA will ultimately determine how much is forgiven. Once that determination is made, the SBA will fund the bank that amount, and you will be made aware of your forgiveness amount. All right, so let's wrap this up. Realistically, the entire process can take months after you actually apply for loan forgiveness to find out what happens. So, if you have a transaction or something going on that will be impacted by the PPP loan and your forgiveness amount, I encourage you to speak with your accountant and to work to take action as soon as possible. Okay, now we are entering into part 2 of the video. Let's dive a little deeper into the details of applying. I'm going to briefly talk about three very important forms: the Form 3508, the Form 3508EZ, and the Form 3508S. I will have a link to each form in the description, so please make sure you check out the description. Let's start with the original loan application from the SBA website, the Form 3508. This form is 5 pages long and applies to all borrowers. Please note, however, that another form, such as the 3508EZ or the 3508S, may be better suited for other situations. Let's move on to the Form 3508EZ. This form is 3 pages long and applies to those who can meet one of 3 conditions. These are the 3 conditions. Number 1, for sole proprietors, independent contractors, and self-employed individuals with no employees. Number 2, you did not reduce salaries or wages by 25% and did not reduce the number of hours of the employees. And condition number 3, experienced a reduction in business activity as a result of COVID-19 health directives and did not reduce salaries and wages by 25% or more. And finally, let's talk about the Form 3508S. This form applies to borrowers with $50,000 or less in PPP loans. The total aggregate must be less than $2 million with affiliates. The Form 3508S is the newest form, and this rule relieves borrowers from having to reduce forgiveness if they had a reduction in payroll or reduced compensation during the covered period. Please speak with your accountant to help determine which form applies best to your own individual situations. Alright guys, so we've gone through part 1 of the video and part 2. We are now entering into part 3. Let's talk about some common questions. Many questions are directly covered on the SBA website, and I will provide a link to these frequently asked questions below. First, the PPP Loan Forgiveness application forms have an October 31st, 2020 expiration date in the upper right-hand corner. What does this mean? The October 31st date is displayed for compliance with the SBA. Refer to the timeline in Part 1 for due dates for loan forgiveness applications. Please note, and this is very important, borrowers may submit a loan forgiveness application anytime before the maturity date of the loan, which will be either 2 or 5 years from loan origination. But Johnny, earlier in the video you said 10 months, so let's address this. Earlier in the video I mentioned having 10 months to apply after the covered period. If you do not apply within 10 months, loan payments are no longer deferred and the borrower must begin making payments on the loan. So that's why in part 1, I used 10 months in the timeline for the due date to apply for loan forgiveness after the end of the covered period. Next question, what should we do as business owners as we wait for the covered period to end? This is a great question, and here are some tips and suggestions. Please maintain records for all eligible loan forgiveness expenses. Make sure you are aware and have a clear understanding of what expenses are truly eligible for forgiveness. Please be on the lookout for emails from your loan provider for information regarding the forgiveness application process. Remember, each bank may have a different process, as some banks are ready to receive applications right now and some are not. Make sure you read all correspondence with your bank carefully and understand the process. Another tip is to try to find out what information you will need for the application now and start to compile that information so that you are ready to go. As we noted, the application process takes time, so do your best to be prepared and make the process as seamless as possible. And finally, what's going on with blanket loan forgiveness? Is there blanket loan forgiveness? As of right now, there is no blanket forgiveness. However, there is a ton of uncertainty. As many of you know, our congressional leaders are working to try to come to a bipartisan agreement for a second stimulus package. Hopefully, the PPP loan will be addressed in the second stimulus package, and we can receive further guidance on additional issues such as blanket forgiveness. But for now, we have to wait and see. And remember, I am a CPA, but I am not your CPA. Please be sure to always consult with your own CPA and accountant for information and advice on your own situations. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and please stay tuned for additional updates. If you have not clicked subscribe, please click that button now. I would really appreciate it. As always, stay healthy, stay sane, and I cannot wait to see you all soon.